Hello everyone, I am so happy that you are here and welcome to lesson number 71 of A Course in Miracles. Only God's plan for salvation will work. You may not realize that the ego has set up a plan for salvation in opposition to God's. It is this plan in which you believe. Since it is the opposite of God's, you also believe that to accept God's plan in place of the ego's is to be damned. This sounds preposterous, of course, but after we have considered just what the ego's plan is, perhaps you will realize that, however preposterous it may be, you do believe in it. The ego's plan for salvation centers around holding grievances. It maintains that if someone else spoke or acted differently, if some external circumstance or event were changed, you would be saved. Thus, the source of salvation is constantly perceived as outside yourself. Each grievance you hold is a declaration and an assertion in which you believe that says, if this were different, I would be saved. The change of mind necessary for salvation is thus demanded of everyone and everything except yourself. The role assigned to your own mind in this plan, then, is simply to determine what, other than itself, must change if you are to be saved. According to this insane plan, any perceived source of salvation is acceptable, provided that it will not work. This ensures that the fruitless search will continue. For the illusion persists that, although this hope has always failed, there is still ground for hope in other places and in other things. Another person will yet better serve. Another situation will yet offer success. Such is the ego's plan for your salvation. Surely you can see how it is in strict accord with the ego's basic doctrine: seek, but do not find. For what could more surely guarantee that you will not find salvation than to channelize all your efforts in searching for it where it is not? God's plan for salvation works simply because by following His direction, you seek for salvation where it is. But if you are to succeed, as God promises you will, you must be willing to seek there only. Otherwise, your purpose is divided and you will attempt to follow two plans for salvation that are diametrically opposed in all ways. The result can only bring confusion, misery, and a deep sense of failure and despair. How can you escape all this? Very simple. The idea for today is the answer. Only God's plan for salvation will work. There can be no real conflict about this, because there is no possible alternative to God's plan that will save you. His is the only plan that is certain in its outcome. His is the only plan that must succeed. Let us practice recognizing this certainty today. And let us rejoice that there is an answer to what seems to be a conflict with no resolution possible. All things are possible to God. Salvation must be yours because of His plan, which cannot fail. Begin the 2 longer practice periods for today by thinking about today's idea and realizing that it contains 2 parts, each making equal contribution to the whole. God's plan for your salvation will work, and other plans will not. Do not allow yourself to become depressed or angry at the second part. It is inherent in the first. And in the first is your full release from all your own insane attempts and mad proposals to free yourself. They have led you to depression and anger, but God's plan will succeed. It will lead to release and joy. Remembering this, let us devote the remainder of the extended practice periods to asking God to reveal His plan to us. Ask Him very specifically, what would you have me do? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say, and to whom? Give Him full charge of the rest of the practice period and let Him tell you what needs to be done by you in His plan for your salvation. He will answer in proportion to your willingness to hear His voice. Refuse not to hear. The very fact that you are doing the exercises proves that you have some willingness to listen. This is enough to establish your claim to God's answer. In the shorter practice periods, tell yourself often that God's plan for salvation and only His will work. Be alert to all temptation to hold grievances today and respond to them with this form of today's idea. Holding grievances is the opposite of God's plan for salvation, and only His plan will work. Try to remember today's idea some 6 or 7 times an hour. There could be no better way to spend a half minute or less than to remember the source of your salvation and to see it where it is. Okay, that is lesson number 71 of A Course in Miracles. Only God's plan for salvation will work. Oh my goodness, I love this lesson as there's so much to unpack here, and I can see opportunities to expand much further than in previous lessons as a result of writing this one. And I am assuming that if you are still here listening to these lessons, that you may have at least contemplated on accepting the truth that salvation is not only possible, but that there are many people in the world right now that can attest to having been saved. But saved from what? Saved from the body-mind. Saved from the idea that we are separate individuals that walk and think in linear time. But how can we be saved? By practicing presence. And I can attest and corroborate that God's plan for salvation works, or else I would not be expanding on these lessons. I can attest in the name of the Father that there's only one reality, one mind, one life, and no other. But for the sake of language, I have to say I. But let me tell you, there is no I, no me, nor you, because there is no body-mind. And that's precisely why only God's plan for salvation will work. Because there is no reality to individuality nor separation. Because there is nothing and no one but God. And that's great news. Because that's where all the power comes from within. From the source of salvation, which is now, where God hides in plain sight. That's why only God's plan for salvation will work. So, what's God's plan for salvation? For the apparent you to quiet the chit-chat of the apparent mind. Because through silence, God reveals itself. That's how you are saved. The present moment is the source of salvation. The present moment is the eternal now, the only reality, mind and life. That's why Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He was referring to the peace within, the only authority. That's why in A Course in Miracles it says, quote, peace is a natural heritage of spirit. Everyone is free to refuse to accept his inheritance, but he is not free to establish what his inheritance is. The problem everyone must decide is the fundamental question of authorship. Yes, the problem is a question of authorship, or you could say the problem is a question of identity. But you can't change the changeless truth. You can deny your eternal identity, but you can never ever lose it. In other words, no matter how much you believe to be a real separate individual, you are not. You don't exist as a mortal because you are the eternal, but because you seem to think that you do. Language has to be used as if you did. But God's plan for salvation is for you to realize that you were never the body-mind, and thus realize you have always been the boundless, unlimited mind of God, appearing as you and everything seen in the infinite universe. That's why only God's plan will work, because God's mind is all there is. That's why God's will is done. His will has already been accomplished because separation never happened. And the same can be said about you. And to realize this is to be saved. So, what's God's plan for salvation for you? For you to effortlessly be nothing, to be peace, to be still, to be now. But to the dual mind, this sounds like 4 different things to be, but that's not the case. To be nothing, to be no one, to be still, to be now, to be peace, are synonymous. They are all one. And that's why meditation is a great tool for a determined devotee to silence the mind. Because with some apparent start-up effort, you can be present throughout the day. Presence is the invisible key to heaven. That's why in this lesson, it asks us to devote some time to asking God to reveal His plan to us by asking Him very specifically, what would you have me do? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say and to whom? And I would like to expand on the answers to these very insightful questions. What would you have me do? Nothing. Just be still, meaning be present, be silent, the effortless state of the empty mind. Where would you have me go? Nowhere, because there's no place where God is not. And that's why salvation is not dependent on a particular place, church, country, or holy site to be realized. But to answer this question more clearly, there is nowhere to go, nowhere to be but the eternal now, because there's nothing else. What would you have me say? There's nothing to say except to say that silence is the language of eternal peace now. And to whom? To no one. There is nobody, because there is no reality to the body-mind. The only reality is the presence of God, appearing as all images seen in the infinite universe without exclusion. But we can't be present and be lost in thoughts about the past. We can't be in the now and hold on to grievances simultaneously. That's why this lesson asks us to be alert to all temptation to hold grievances today and respond to them with this form of today's idea. Holding grievances is the opposite of God's plan for salvation, and only His plan will work. Of course, because grievances keep us thinking, seemingly hooked in the cycle of time. And that's why I would like to remind you, as the Course says, that there is no order of difficulty in miracles, meaning that even if you're going through a difficult time right now, you can still practice presence. You can still be present with your pain, with your grief, because you are not your pain nor your grief. You are eternal peace. And the heavenly mind is always available now, no matter what's happening in the play of duality. And sometimes there is pain and grief in the present moment, but don't let that discourage you. Peace goes with you wherever you go. So please don't listen to the voice of the ego that says that this is not the right time or the right moment in your life for peace. That your grievances or situation in your life make it impossible to accomplish your goal. No. Use your pain as motivation to get out of the mind and thus from time. What I am trying to say is don't use grievances as an excuse to think that salvation is not possible in your life right now. Use your pain as motivation to get out of the mind, because there is no time but the eternal now. Now being eternal. Now being the source of salvation. And you can practice presence and let grievances disappear within the wind. Now. I hope you enjoy practicing lesson number 71. Please let me know if you have any questions, and see you tomorrow for lesson number 72. Have a wonderful day. Bye.